everyone, welcome back for a little TLC. So for this month, we're going to be tackling questions that children ask. And for context, I am talking about children who are really under the age of 9. This week, we're going to be talking about gender identity, how we can answer questions if our children ask us about gender identity. And I think it's important for us to talk about this because in schools, teachers are being encouraged to say things like children rather than boys and girls. And I have seen personally parents who allow their children to pick how they will identify on a particular day. And so I think we have to be ready to answer this question. If our children ask us, why does he look like a she, or why does she look like a he? And y'all have totally been asked this before. So hopefully this video is helpful to you if your children ask you something regarding gender identity. Let's get into it. I think that it's important for us to start off by making a distinction between sex and gender. So sex is, or your sex is assigned at birth based on biology or certain physiological characteristics. Most of us learn that girls have XX chromosomes, boys have XY chromosomes, things of that nature. And then gender is how we relate to our assigned sex, or gender expression is how we express through our clothes, through our style, how we feel about our particular sex. We know that in the Bible, when it comes to sex, God created male and female. And then regarding gender, I couldn't really find much scripture about gender. I was able to find one scripture in particular that talked about how women should not wear men's clothing and vice versa. But to be honest, I can't really understand the context of that to figure out exactly what was going on in that time period that required that particular command. And theologians are all over the place regarding what that scripture meant. So if y'all know, let your girl know, because I have no idea. But there was really not a lot about gender in the Bible. A lot about sex, but not so much about gender. If y'all know some scriptures that are talking about gender, then feel free to put them in the comments and we can kind of go from there. I do think that dealing with gender can be difficult for us because answering gender questions really requires us to think about our own personal biases. It requires us to think about how we have been socialized, whether right or wrong. And there's a lot of gray area because the scripture is largely silent on gender and gender expression. So how do we handle it? Well, I think we have to really help our children understand that how a person looks on the outside and even how they act is not what defines them as a girl or as a boy. It does not define their sex. Really, the only way, and this is something we have to talk to our children about, that we can know a person's sex or if they're a girl or a boy is if we ask them or if we see them naked, which I'm personally not trying to see that. That would be highly inappropriate. So we really have to have these conversations with our children about the types of clothes that people wear, how they wear their hair, how they act. Even names can be pretty like sex neutral at this point. Those things don't define a person's sex. And I also think that having those conversations might require us to do a lot of unpacking of our own personal bias. So for example, you can't tackle your son if he wants to play with the doll, or you can't give your daughter the side eye if she decides she wants to wear pants every day and doesn't necessarily feel like she wants to wear skirts or dresses. We really have to think about how we have been socialized with respect to gender and remember that those things don't necessarily define our sex. The bottom line is gender expression does not tell us whether we are a girl or a boy. In fact, in some cultures, up until about puberty, the girls and the boys wear the same clothes. They're participating in the same activities. They have the same sort of haircut. So you really can't tell. And that is quite all right. Nobody makes a big deal about it. And I believe that if we make this distinction, between sex and gender expression and allow people to express themselves in the ways that are most comfortable for them, then it will allow people to experience a lot more freedom. And isn't freedom what being in Jesus Christ is about anyway? For example, I have a friend who doesn't like to wear dresses that much. She likes to wear, button ups and pants. But that doesn't make her any less female than I am. Because again, gender expression and sex are two totally different things. Every difference does not require a diagnosis. It requires us to do some self-reflection and possibly challenging ourselves to think outside of societal norms. And speaking of diagnosis, I really want to talk about this as a quick, or maybe not so quick, because I feel like I've been talking for a while, aside. But I have noticed that there are some children who are, and I'm talking about like children like the age of 5, whose parents or the children themselves are saying that they're like an opposite sex because they like to not do the things or wear the things that may ascribe to the sex that they have been assigned. And so I want to encourage parents that if your children come up to you and say, like, oh, I'm a boy now, and they're a girl, or if they're a girl, they come up to you and say that they're a boy now, I encourage you to just ask them the question of what do they mean by that? Because I have found that most of the time when children say things like this, they don't necessarily think that they really are a member of the opposite sex. They just want to engage in certain things that the opposite sex is able to do more freely, such as wearing pants, such as playing with dolls, such as hanging out with the boys or the girls. And so I want to encourage you all that if you find yourself having to have that conversation, do not diagnose your 5-year-old, 6-year-old, very young child with being transgender. Allow them to be free in how they might express their own gender, and let them know that what they're doing on the outside does not define their actual sex. In summary, sex is assigned at birth. Gender is how we express ourselves in relation to our sex. But we have to remember that gender is deeply rooted in societal norms, whether right or wrong, and cultural norms. So we have to be willing to kind of tackle that and kind of see where we are. I have on pants today, but that does not mean that I identify as a boy. I'm just a female who is wearing pants. Really, the only way we can know someone's sex is if we ask them. This is what I have for today. I feel like this was a little longer than normal, but I hope that it's helpful as you're trying to engage in these conversations with your children, but also as we unpack these things ourselves as adults. Have your children asked any questions about gender? How have you gone about explaining those things to them if they've seen something in school that might be, a little confusing for them? If y'all have any scriptures that are pertaining to gender, again, I encourage you to send those to me. That's what I have for this week. I look forward to reading your comments and hearing from you, and I will see you next time for a little TLC. I think my sister forgot I'm recording. Also, my birthday is coming up at the end of this month, and so people have been asking me what I'm going to be doing. There is a church called Revival Now Global. I'm a local church, and they're actually having a fast that's leading up to my birthday. They didn't do this for me, but I tend to think, what a better way for me to end one year and start a new one than with a fast that just happens to be going on during my birthday week. And so I'm going to put information about how you can get fasting information. They're doing like a Jew/Daniel fast. And I really encourage you all to fast with me for the week leading up to my birthday. That will be like the 25th through the 30th of September. I'm expecting great things from God, some great clarity. And so even if you can't do the entire week, I encourage you to pick up at least one day, fast with me as I go into another year. All right, that's really it this time. I will see you next time for a little TLC. Bye-bye.